Is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Casey, can you hear me? Can anyone hear me? Well, Casey's unmuted, so he should be able to hear me. Everyone else is muted. Okay, Helen, I'm going to unmute you. Where'd you go? Helen, can you hear me? Can anyone hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Helen, I unmuted you. Can you hear me? I'll try someone else. Zach, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, great. I unmuted you. I'm gonna mute you again. Nicole, can you hear me?
Hey, Tia, they might be able to hear you, but if they don't have a microphone, then they can't.
It looks like Nicole has a microphone because I just unmuted her.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So Casey, when it comes time to do your portion, do you want me to click through the slides or do you want me to give you control and let you click through slides on your computer?
You could still click for me. That's fine.
Okay. I will be your clicker. I'm going to mute you again, Nicole. I hope you can hear me. I could not hear you if you were talking. So let me see who we're still waiting for. We got Matt.
Hey, Tia, and folks can always write into the little chat box here if there's any questions or if there's any technical difficulties or anything.
Yes, right here. I can write to you guys and say, hello, welcome. All right, we're still waiting for Lance and Max, Aaron, Kevin. Do you know if Aaron is logging in? Or are you guys sitting in the same room? I'm going to unmute you so you can answer. Or you can type your answer in. I'm still waiting for 3 people. Oh, looks like someone else just logged in. Kent has raised his hand. Do you have a question, Kent? Oh, hi, I can hear you. Can I hear you, though? Let's see. Audio. Okay, Kent and Kevin, I both have you guys unmuted. Do you guys have microphones? And if you do, can you say something?
Can you hear me?
I can. That was Kent, right?
Okay. Yep, that's
Okay.
good.
I'm going to mute you again.
All right, sounds good.
How about Kevin? Are you there? No word from Kevin. I have a question mark by his name. Go to the questions panel. Oh, Kevin says, we can hear you. Kevin and Aaron are listening together. Okay, great. I can't hear you, though. Nicole can hear me. Angie can hear me. We don't have a mic, but we are listening together. Kent can hear me. Lance will not be able to make it. He was called into a meeting. Okay, great. So, well, we're still missing one person, but I wasn't 100% sure if he was going to participate or not. And how about Aaron or Kevin? Do you guys know if Mike was planning on listening in? I know he registered and he showed some interest in it, but I don't know if we should wait a few minutes for him or if we should just get going. Feel free to type your answer. Mike Paul. Okay, we don't know. So we only know what we know, so we will carry on without him. Okay, so according to this update, my computer will restart in 720 minutes. I think we have enough time. Okay, so this is Tia speaking, your Partner Services Coordinator from the Oregon Health Authority, and I'm in a small conference room with Carrie Gentry, and Casey is in Springfield, but these are the 3 staff members that you have to cover the training today and next week. So welcome and thank you for logging in. I hope this works out well. So far it seems to be pretty smooth, and I think that we're recording the webinar. I'm not 100% sure. Hopefully we are, so that it can be visited in the future, and hopefully we don't say the wrong thing and everything can be just uploaded on the website and you guys can refer to it in the future or have new staff members refer to it as needed. So let's see, any other administrative things? Like Casey said, if you have any questions, there's a questions, little questions box for you to type something in. It looks like you can raise your hand if you have a question. But of course I have to be aware that these things are going on, and I'm going to be talking for a short while here. I'll also give an opportunity to unmute you if you want to ask a question. If it's easier to ask it that way, you can ask to be unmuted. We're pretty flexible. There's only a few of us. There's 12 of us total logged in, and that includes Casey and myself. So there's 10 of you, actually 11, because Aaron and Kevin are in the same location, county partner staff. So a small group, kind of informal, but formal because it's a webinar and it's an actual training. And we're getting CEUs for this. I did put in the request to get CEUs for the training today and the training for the day and partial day next week, which is good. I got the pre-approval for that. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and get started. I think I am. Here we go. So here we are today. This is the webinar, or this is the agenda that I've sent out numerous times. Included on this one is the updated address for the facility on Wednesday in Bend. If you have an old one, the address is 2577. There's a 2 in front of the 5. So what we're doing today is we're doing the survey overview webinar. And I will be covering the survey basics. I'm going to be going over some nitty-gritty with the forms, where to find them, what they look like, how to edit them, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about the first few pages of the forms, and then Carrie Gentry is going to take over and do the bulk part of the survey forms, talk about what to look for, how to fill them out properly. Then Casey's going to step in and go over how to prepare for a water system survey and do cover what to do and how to prepare for the on-site inspection. And that's all we're going to talk about today. And then next week, we're going to get together and we're going to prepare for a water system survey. We're going to have a lunch delivered to us at the facility in Bend. And then we all have a time at approximately 12:30 to meet our water systems to actually conduct the water system survey, do the field work. And then we'll be meeting back in the afternoon at that same place where we were earlier in the morning. And we'll be doing some survey write-up in the same small groups that we split up into. And then the following day, which is Thursday, the 18th, the morning before fall training, we have the room available at 8 for if the survey write-up didn't get finished, or I'm pretty sure we're all going to want to meet up on the morning of the 18th, so I think we should plan for that. There's no lunch provided. There's no snacks provided. The only food provided that day is the lunch of fall training. So that's something to keep in mind. So that's what we will be doing on those days. So I'm going to dive right into the survey basics, but I want to ask anyone if they had any questions about that. Does everyone have rooms reserved in Bend? I know most of us are staying at the Fairfield Inn on Wall Street, which is closer to the venue for the Thursday fall training. It's a little ways away from the venue on Wednesday, but it's Bend. It's maybe 5 or 10 minutes away. Just wanted to pause and see if anyone had questions about the overall layout of the training and the way things are going to work. And I will look at your questions real quick. How do I pop this out? Okay, I don't see anything new. How do I... Sorry guys, I'm trying to figure out how to... Okay, so I guess if you have a question, raise your hand. That way I can actually click on you and know to look for the question. But I'm assuming that there are no questions right now. So just a little bit of some basics about what a water system survey is. And I took this definition from the Water System Survey Training Manual, which is found on our partners version of our drinking water website. And it is an on-site review of all the components of the water system, following it from the source, the treatment, the distribution, looking at the operations and maintenance, looking at the monitoring and compliance, to evaluate the adequacy of the water system, and ultimately see if there's any contaminants to the threat of public health, potential areas where contaminants can enter the drinking water system. It's also referred to as a sanitary survey by EPA, and it's consisted of a series of forms that we're going to go over and a cover letter, and then the conduction of an on-site visit, either done by a registered environmental health specialist or a PE. Surveys are done every 3 years for community water systems, unless they're identified as an outstanding performer, and I think we dive into that a little bit, maybe not. And then for every 5 years for the non-community water systems and those that are outstanding performers. And here at the Drinking Water Program, we provide the lists at the beginning of the year, beginning of the calendar year, for all of those water systems that will be surveyed during that year. And we let the counties know the surveys that are coming up. And those water systems also receive a letter to let them know, because it's a infrequently of enough schedule that water systems forget that they have a fee associated with the survey. So we send them a letter at the beginning of the year letting them know that they're due for a survey, and that there's going to be a price associated with it, or a cost, and that they will hear from their county regulator to schedule that survey. When you said PE, it's a professional engineer? And that's the requirements for that are outlined in this is confusing, the PE, which is the program element that shapes and defines the work that's carried out at the local counties and Department of Ag. The PE program element 50 states that the counties and local health departments and Department of Ag will carry out the drinking water work either by a registered environmental health specialist or a professional engineer. Thank you for asking clarification on the PE. Is it licensed? A professional engineer is licensed, and a registered environmental health specialist is licensed as well. Carrie's a PE. She could probably talk about that a little bit more, maybe not. And Casey and I are both a registered environmental health specialist, and that's either a certification through the Oregon Health Licensing Authority or NEHA, National Environmental, NEHA, what's NEHA stand for? National Environmental Health Registration. We can talk more offline if you have specific questions about those requirements. So the survey, everything survey related and everything associated with counties and partners conducting water system surveys, all the documents are found on our drinking water website, and I'm going to actually guide us through the website and opening up a survey document. So I hope that everyone is at a computer where they're able to minimize the webinar and go to the drinking water website and open up some documents with me. But this is just an overview of how things look on the county portion of our website, and there's a tab on the left that says water system surveys, and underneath that tab it breaks it down by the type of documents that you're looking for. There's templates, there's manuals and related documents. There's a whole plethora of information in there. But where we're going to go down to is we're going to actually open up one of the survey forms. There's 3 different types of packets for 3 different types of water systems. The county folks, you guys are mostly going to be associated in working with the groundwater survey template. And notice that there's a revised date right here. This lets you know when this document was uploaded on the website. Oftentimes we will make edits and make revisions to our survey documents. So you want to make sure that this date on the bottom of your survey form, which we'll take a look at, matches. We just want to make sure that you have the most current version of the survey form. And if you're ever not sure about which packet to use, there's a document up here that lets you know which template packet is needed for which type of water system. But for the majority of your water systems, you're going to be using either packet 1 or packet 2. Oh, sorry, packet 1 or packet 3. This transient survey template packet or this community non-transient survey packet. Check for questions. Okay, we're good there. All right, so now here's where I'm going to ask everyone to open up a website and actually go to this web address, and I'm going to navigate us to downloading a document. I hope that this works. I hope everyone is at a computer and not logged in through a mobile device. If it doesn't work for you, I would definitely recommend going back and following my steps in the future and making the changes to the survey forms before you actually need to get down and use them, because the changes that I'm going to walk you through will definitely make your job a lot easier in the future. So here's the website. This is the friendly URL to our drinking water website. It's www.healthoregon.org/DWS. So that should take you to a page that looks like the drinking water website. And the way that you know if you're on the main drinking water website is if there's a glass with a ghost hand, a ghost arm being filled underneath a faucet. I'll give you a few seconds to get there. And it looks like mic is on, so welcome. Doesn't look like you can talk though, because you do not have a PIN. All right, so from the drinking water website, I'm going to hope that everyone made it there. I want you to open the partners page, and that is under resources, which is the middle. There's 3 boxes: services, resources, and something I can't see, news. Under resources, click County and Department of Agricultural Resources, and then another page pops up. And on that page, it says for environmental health specialist. That is you. This is where all of the information that you need for providing most of your regulatory functions for drinking water is housed and found and located. A lot of the documents on here are password protected, meaning that this page is open to the public, but we can still limit what the public can see and who can get in and make changes and type in the documents and submit them to us by putting a password on it. So anything that's a Word document or that's fillable, you'll be able to open, but there may be a dialog box that pops up and asks you for a password. So that's just kind of a heads up. It didn't used to be that way. You used to need a password just to get into the website. Now the website's open to anyone, and so we had to put some sort of control in there. So we put password on the Word documents. So I'm hoping that everyone is now at the partners website. Oh, too far. All right, so from the partners page, I want you to go to the survey section, and I want you to download a blank survey form and open this document. And I prefer you to download packet 1, groundwater template. I'm unsure as to how long I should give you to do this. So one thing is, after you download that document, what we're going to do is we're going to save it to your computer, and we're going to take off that requirement to put in a password every time you open it. And the reason why this is important is if you're saving copies on your local computer and someone else in the office or a new staff member or just anyone else needs to open that document to look up anything for any reason and there's a password in there, they need to know that password. And sometimes that password isn't always common knowledge. So the easiest thing for you to do is to just remove the password because you've already downloaded it from the website and then save it to your computer. So we're going to go over removing the password. The caveat with that is that you want to frequently check back to the partners website and make sure that you're still using the current version of the survey document. And you'll know by looking at the date in the lower left-hand corner in the document itself and just seeing if the date uploaded online is still current with the one that you have. All right, so when you open up the document, you should get a box like this. And the password is, with a capital W, water 1, 2, 3. It's as easy as that. Capital W, water, W-A-T-E-R, 1, 2, 3. Say enter. That lets you open up the document, and then you can start looking at all of the goodies that are available in there. Okay, so now what I want everyone to do is I want you to save a copy of this file to your desktop. And why I'm having you do this is going to be your working or your local copy so that you don't have to keep visiting the Drinking Water website to re-download the document. So do me a favor and save it to your desktop. Okay, so now with the survey file open, I want you to go to, in the menu, I want you to go to File. What we're doing is we're unprotecting the document. We're taking away that password requirement every time you open up the document. So I want you to go to File, and then I want you to click on Protect Document. And then I want you to go down to the Encrypt with Password option. And in here, a box pops up with a bunch of characters in it. So what you need to do is you need to go to the last character and you need to delete all of that out of there and then say enter. So what you're doing is you're turning off the password requirement for this document. Deleted it out, and then I said okay, and then save it again. So when you save it again to your desktop or to your computer or wherever you have a working copy saved, there's no longer going to be the requirement to put that password in there every time you open it. And can you raise your hand if you were able to do all of that and we are on the same page? Helen's hand's up. Jillian's hand's up. Nicole, Susan, Zach. Hey. All right. Okay. It looks like most people were able to do that. Sorry if it was a little slow. I'm not sure how much time to give you guys to walk through these steps. Okay, so now we have a copy saved on our computer and there's no longer a password required to open it, which should be great for opening up things in the future, sending it on to coworkers if you need someone to review it for you, sending it to the state so someone here can review it. Okay, so with the document open, what we're going to go through next is if you look at this the screenshot I have right here, and it should look similar to the copy that you have on your computer. The header of the survey document is basically the statistics for the specific water system. So see how it says XYZ water system, PWSID 41, pound, pound, pound. All this information needs to be entered in by you before you go do the water system survey. And in order to do that, as you can see, it's grayed out, and the survey form is in protection mode, which is different than password. So we're gonna go through the specifics on how to protect and unprotect your document. And the reason why it's in protection mode is because you see these little gray spots in here. These are so that you can tab through the form and just click yes and no and quickly fill out the form as it's meant to be done as a form. But in order to do that, it has to be in protection mode. But you can't edit the header while it's in protection mode. So we got to go through some more we're going to add a little key icon up here on the top so that you guys can quickly turn it on and off out of protection and unprotect mode. And please bear with me if you've already been through this. There's a lot of very new people on the webinar right now, so I want to make sure that they are able to get this little lock icon box on the top of their form, because this makes your life a lot easier. So in order to type anything up here, we need to turn off the protection. So you're going to go to the Review tab, and then you're going to click on Restrict Editing, and then from there you're going to click on Stop Protection. And then what that enables you to do is that enables you to then click on the header, type in the name of the water system on the header, put in the PWSID, put in the name, or put in the date that you're doing the survey. But turning on this little feature right here makes it so that you can just click this and click on Stop Protection, Turn On Protection, because you want to turn the protection on when you're filling out the body of the form itself. So you want to make sure that after you stop protecting it, you also turn it back on. And adding this little key icon, this little lock on the top, makes it a lot easier to toggle back and forth between those. So now I'm going to walk you guys through how to add this right here. And let me stop and see if there's any questions. I still see some hands up, and I think that's because I asked you to put your hands up. So I don't know what to do. What is the password? It is asking. It's Jillian, I don't know which specific password you were referring to. The password in when you first open the document is capital W, water with a capital W, 123, and then there is no password in the restrictions portion. You don't put any password in there, you just say enter. I think that's a good point. I don't think I mentioned that anywhere in here. You don't type anything and you just say enter. So now we're going to walk through how to add this. So on the main page of your Word document, there's a little down caret here. Click on that. And something should pop up that looks similar to this, that says Customize Quick Access Toolbar. And then you want to go all the way down to More Commands. And then when you go into More Commands, there's an option for Customize this Quick Access Toolbar. And what we're going to do is we're going to put in an item into that Quick Access Toolbar. But first we have to find that item. So from the Choose Commands drop-down menu, you're going to go to the Review tab, which is ultimately what you clicked on earlier was the Review tab. So then you go to Review tab. From the Review tab, we're adding Restrict Editing to the Quick Access Toolbar. So go down and find Restrict Editing, click Add, and it should pop it on over here into this right-hand box. And then you say OK when you're done. And let me check in with everyone and see how many people I lost. Be fantastic if I lost no one. All right, so then when you exit out of there, you should get this little key with a little piece of paper on your quick access toolbar. If that worked, raise your hand, please. Look at all those hands going up. Success across the board. If for some reason it didn't work for you, I can follow up with you later on, and if you're running a Mac, maybe one reason why things look different and it's not working, I can help you later on, or you can reach out to your tech services person. There's resources for you so that we can make sure we get this on there. So with that, you can just click on that little lock and unlock, and that stop protection box will pop up, and you say stop protection, and then you can enter information in the header, and then you have to turn on protection again. But remember, there is no password to put in there. It's just a matter of telling it yes or no you want to protect and not protect. And that just enables you to tab through the form and fill it out like an actual form. All right, so we've done that. We've downloaded the document. We've added your quick access lock and unlock restriction on at the top, and let's just save it one more time. It's always good to save. All right, so we now know what a survey is. We know where to find it. We know how to remove the password and the quick shortcut. So now let's get into the actual survey. The survey is a paper document that contains all of these pages, or depending on which version you download, all of these areas are covered in a water system survey. These are the key elements of a water system survey, and the preceding slides are going to cover all of these pages in your survey. Oops. You're able to tailor the forms to meet the needs of your specific systems. Everything is basically built into a table format in the Word document. If you're not using the bottom rows on the table, you can delete those. Just be a little cognizant when you start deleting things and changing things within the table, is that things get a little crazy and a little wonky, so I don't recommend getting a little too overboard with that. But definitely delete or add pages as you need. If you don't need a page in the survey, just right-click on that table and delete it. There's additional pages on the back side that help you fill out some of the pages of the form. You want to delete those before you turn the surveys in. You want to make sure that you streamline the form, so that means print it double-sided so that you're using less resources, takes less postage when you're mailing it to us, smaller in your water system file if you're printing off copies. You want to make sure that you pre-populate as much of the form as you can before you go out and do the site visit, which we're going to talk a little bit more about throughout this presentation. And I think that was it for that. Let me check for questions. Everyone's still got their hands up. Your guys' arms must be tired. Do we have a question? Questions. Questions. What is the password? I don't have a mic. Oh, those are old. I don't know why this is so small. Okay, so another thing to remember when you're filling out the survey forms is there's a yes, no, and an NA option for just about everything in there. So don't leave anything blank. It should be one of those three options. And if for some reason you leave something blank or you say a no, just follow up in the comment section why, so that those that look after you, those that review your survey, and those at the water system understand why it's a no, why it's an NA, or why it was blank. But like I said, there should never be a blank. So I take back what I said about leaving it blank. I talked about the information pages. So the first couple pages of the form list the significant deficiencies and rule violations as a summary, and then the back page is just a quick snapshot of all the different deficiencies and rule violations by the category. And the way that you know in the main bulk pages of the survey forms if it's a significant deficiency or rule violation is if it has a black bullet circle by it. So the black bullet items, sanitary seal encasing watertight. That's a significant deficiency or rule violation. That is basically a direct pathway to contamination. Those are serious matters and they need to be addressed, definitely looked at, not overlooked. And if any of these definitely are a yes, it needs to make sure that if any bulleted item is a yes here on your main summary sheet, pages 1 and 2, it needs to correspond with that as being yes. And it also needs to be highlighted and identified in the cover letter as needing correction. So here's these two cover pages, or these two, not cover pages, but these two summary pages I was talking about. This is where you put your name, the date the corrective action plan is due, which we'll talk about that when we talk about survey write-up. And then this is just a summary for, this captures everything that's found in the survey forms themselves, whether if there was a source significant deficiency, yes or no. So either yes or no should always be checked on this page. And if it's a yes, you should write down here what the deficiency was. And then this yes under source, under well construction, should match something over here on this page, page 2, source deficiency well construction. So if you check yes here, this one right here should say yes, and then something in here should be checked yes as well, which should match into something on that page on the survey form that has a black dot next to it that probably is worded exactly the same as this, should also be checked. That's one of the common errors and common mistakes that we see when we get surveys here at the state, is that this summary page doesn't match what's found in the survey form, and possibly it doesn't match what's also found in the cover letter. The next page is the inventory narrative. This just includes the demographics of the water system, the type of water system it is. A lot of this information can be taken from data online, but you also want to double check, and Casey's going to talk a little bit about this, just the overall demographics of the system, the population, the number of connections, contact information. There's a spot down here for emergency systems, and then there's a little narrative option, or a little narrative box on the bottom where you explain the water system and what type of treatment they have. The next page of the water system, or in the next page of the survey form, is the schematic, which follows the visual flow of water through the distribution. So from the source, so I have an example here that I think carries over into a couple other slides here, follows the flow of the water through the source. So here we have 2 wells, and well 1 and well 2, through some treatment, another well, through a reservoir, through some more treatment, through another well, through some more treatment, or through some monitoring, continuous monitoring, through an entry point. This big hashtag is just the hashtag with the extra hashes is the symbol for distribution. And this, along with all of these other little symbols, are found in a supplemental document on the partner's website called, I believe it's called DWS Symbols. But those are just little icons in a Word document that you grab and you drop into here when you draw or create the visual flow of the water through the system. So this represents distribution, and then this would possibly, oh no, that's not another entry point. So that's what this water system schematic is it doesn't always necessarily match up the way things look when you get on site, just because the way that it looks on the paper and the way that it looks on site don't always match up, because we don't want lines to be crossing over each other. We want to just be able to easily see what type of treatment is applied to the water and the way that it flows through the system. We don't really care too much about how things look when you get on site with this page. Some people tend to get a little crazy with the way that they do schematics, and we like to think to just keep it as simple as you can and keep it to the basics and the minimums. But this is a good description of a slightly complicated but well-detailed water system schematic for a groundwater system. Are there any questions so far about those first few portions of the survey? Looks like we may have another person. Mike, I took your hand down because I think it was still up from earlier. If you do have a question, feel free to put your hand back up. I don't want your arm to get tired. Like being in grade school where you have to hold your other arm up to hold your arm up. Okay, it doesn't look like there's any more questions, so I'm going to pass it over to Carrie.
Hello, this is Carrie, and I'm going to talk about the next few pages of the form. I'm using Tia's headset, and it's really weird, so I'm trying to get used to the sound. It's like you're an airplane pilot. I feel like I'm an airplane pilot, and I can't really hear anything. Okay, so, oops. So the next page of the forms is the source information, and here I've picked a water system. Sorry, getting used to the mouse here too. So if you look on Data Online and you look up any water system, you'll see this section here that talks about sources. And this particular water system that I randomly chose has 3 sources, and you can see them listed here. There's well 1, there's well 2, and there's well 5. So on the form, we're kind of duplicating that. And I'm going to talk in a minute about entry points and what those mean. But you'll see here in this left-hand column on the, from Data Online, there's an entry point A with a source AA and an entry point B with a source BA and a source BB. So up on the form, we're definitely duplicating that. And when you're in the field, as Tia was showing you on the schematic, you're trying to draw the flow of water. And as she mentioned before, this hashtag with the extra lines represents the distribution system. So in this instance, we've got source AA, and I'm just randomly showing it. This is not really exactly a real world example, but let's just imagine that those hashtags represent a town. And on the south side of town, you have a source AA coming into the distribution system. And on the north side of town, you have a different source coming into the distribution system. And also on the north side of town, you have source BB coming into the distribution system. So by looking at how the water flows in before it reaches a customer, that's what we use to determine whether a source is on an entry point by itself or on an entry point combined with another source. So in this example, source AA comes into town from the south side, and it doesn't combine with any other source before it reaches town, before it reaches the very first customer. But on the north side of town, where they have this separate well field, they've got 2 sources that come together to a point before it reaches the first customer. Now, that point is not always like a physical point that you can see, but it's more of a conceptual point. So this is where you kind of have to double check what we have listed on Data Online is not always correct. So when you're out in the field doing a water system survey, you want to really talk to them about how these sources enter the distribution system and whether they combine with other sources before they reach the first customer. And so a lot of the details here that are on Data Online, you're going to be talking with the water system about whether the water source is still permanent or whether it's seasonal or what have you. Generally, there are still groundwater sources, and they're reflected here as groundwater sources. You'll also be asking them about the capacity of each source, like how many gallons per minute it can pump, and that can change over time. So it's data that you collect each time you do a survey. So just again, you really want to make sure that the entry point setup that's on Data Online is really reflective of what's happening in the water system, and that's a conversation that you have with the water system when you're out there. So the next page in the form is the well information page. And using the example from the previous one, you can see up here we have source AA we have source BA, and we have source BB. So that system that I found online had a well number 1, a well number 2, and a well number 5. And in all cases, we know that a well log is available. And we know this because if I can go back actually here, we know there's a well log available because we list them online. You could actually click through on that, that blue area here, like this one says, well number 1 says DESC 1805. That is the well log ID number. And so we would know that there's a well log for each water system if it's listed online. And you could actually double check that when you're in the field for a lot of the wells. Some of the older wells don't have this feature, but the newer wells do. So when you're actually at the wellhead, you can look at the casing. That's the steel pipe that comes up out of the ground. And Water Resources Department requires this band with this plaque on it. And you can see this plaque here. Sorry, I'm still trying to find the cursor. It has an L number on it. So this one in this case is L19483. And that's just the, you either have a name, the name of the well log is either based on the county with a number after it, or it's an L number. And each well actually has both of those designations, and we don't really care which one you use. You could use either of them. And as Tia mentioned on here, the black dotted items are those things that are significant deficiencies, and these are the types of things that we'll be looking at. But you're answering yes/no questions for each of these wells, for each of these questions. And this is where you really appreciate that thing that that Tia showed you, that little lock and unlock button at the top of the page that she set up here a few slides ago. And the difference is when you're clicking on these yes/no boxes, if you have that lock button activated or deactivated, one of the two, you can simply just click this and it'll put an X mark on it. Otherwise, it opens up this dialog box and you have to click on checked and then you have to hit OK. So she's really made this much easier. So one thing to note on here that a lot of people get messed up on is this treated water sample tap. So I think for all the water systems that we're going to go out and see here next Thursday or next Wednesday don't have treatment at all. So in all cases, we would be, at least for next week, we would be clicking that NA box. I don't know why I keep losing my cursor. Where'd it go? Thank you. Tia has to find my cursor. So you would be clicking that NA box. So the treated water sample tab would be, you'd be looking for it, like if they add chlorine or if they have arsenic treatment. We want that raw water sample tab really close to the wellhead, and then we want the treated water sample tab after the treatment, but much preferably before storage. So that's something we'll talk about when we're in the field next week. So the other thing you can look at is Water Resources Department has a little find a well log part of their website. And if you need a printed copy of the well log, you can actually just put in either the L tag number here, or you could put in the county identifier. So like on that example I had a few pages ago, it was a Deschutes County, so it said DESC. So you'd use the drop-down menu to select DESC, and then you'd type in the well log number. And then you could search it, and it'll pull up the well log so that you could print out a copy for your files if needed. So deficiencies for wells, as we've sort of mentioned already, sanitary seal and casing not watertight is one of those. And this picture here on the kind of upper right, it has a broken sanitary seal. So usually when I'm out doing a survey in the field, I make sure I have a quarter in my pocket, and I slide that quarter along where I know the sanitary seal is. So that's a gasket, actually, and it should be in place all the way around. I also bring a flashlight because I like to use it not only for light in a dark well house, but also to knock away the cobwebs and scare away the spiders. I don't like spiders. So I try to use the flashlight. And we also, in our Portland office, we have a dental tool, which you've probably had before, in your mouth at the dentist. It's the thing with the mirror on like a long pole. And so we use that to kind of look behind in really tight spaces so that we can look all the way around if we can't easily feel around. And the other thing that we're looking for, of course, is the raw water sample tap, the treated water sample tap, as we talked about. Now, the screen vent, if there is a vent on the well, it has to have a downward screened vent. So the vent here is like this, and you can see it faces downwards, and this little part here, sorry for the picture, but we'll see this in real life next week. There's a screen attached to it. So we don't want an open hole. We certainly don't want an open hole that's turned up, and we don't want just like an open hole down here. So if this pipe weren't here, there'd be a bolt here protecting the hole. So those are the sorts of things you're looking for. And you want it turned down so that nothing can drop into that screen vent that can create some sort of coliform issue. And yes, that can actually happen. The other thing you're looking for is the well, whether the wellhead is protected from flooding. If you're in a flood zone, you might see a wellhead that is awfully high, like to the point where you're not going to be able to go up there and look at it. All the other stuff that you're able to look at will be accessible to you, but the wellhead will be way high. We have a requirement that the wellhead has to be 2 feet above the 100-foot flood level, and in some cases that can be quite high. And then hazards within the well's setback distance. So the 100-foot radius around the well is something that we'll look at, and we'll talk about that when we're in the field next week. And then on Thursday, I'm actually giving like a 45-minute talk on hazards within the setback. So I'm not going to go into too much detail now. I'm just going to check for questions real quick to see if there are any. I'm not. Oh, I see. Thanks. That was helpful. Wait, nope. Are we going down or up here? Okay. Go to which? Yeah. Oh. I don't see any raised hands. So.
That's an old question.
Yep. No questions at this point.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Okay.
Go away.
We're going to make that go away. Okay, there we go. So when you mark a deficiency, so when you have one of those black dotted items and you mark it no, in other words, it doesn't meet it. In this case, the sanitary seal or casing is not watertight. We really want you to put a comment down here in the comment section on the page that indicates what the deficiency was. Like this question is a two-part question, like sanitary seal is different than the casing. As I said, the sanitary seal is a gasket, the casing is this pipe above ground. You can see here somehow there's a perfectly rectangular hole that's been cut into the side of the casing. That thing's not watertight. When I'm out looking at casings and I see a lot of rust on a steel casing like this, what I tend to do is I poke around it, like with my handy flashlight, and just kind of look and see. We've seen casings that are so corroded through that they've created a hole and a pathway for contamination, and that's something that would have to be fixed. So, again, you're looking for the open holes, whether it's on top of the casing and there's a bolt hole that's open, or the vent is turned up, or if there's an actual hole in the side of the casing. Sorry, I keep going backwards instead of forwards. Yeah, okay. So for disinfection and residual maintenance, for that page, the thing that most county and ag staff are going to come across is sodium hypochlorite, so chlorine bleach, basically. To fill out this page, I think it's helpful first to look on data online And there's two types of what we could call disinfection. One of them is disinfection and one is residual maintenance. And I try to do a screenshot of each of those. So this one that you're seeing on a screenshot here, if you were to go on Data Online and look at a water system, underneath the sources, there would be treatment. If there's treatment there, it sort of lays out what that treatment is. And in this case, you can see that it actually says disinfection. So that is truly disinfection. And if that were the case, we would be clicking this checkbox up here for disinfection of source water. If it's residual maintenance, it's going to say on Data Online, residual maintenance hypochlorination, or some version of that, and other. So that's going to be the difference here as to which checkbox you do. You're either going to say it's disinfecting source water or residual maintenance. In some cases, if you're disinfecting source water, you're also carrying residual maintenance, but generally the purpose that you guys will see will be residual maintenance for the most part, because there's very few water systems out there that actually, for groundwater, that do the disinfection, that are actually doing it for disinfection. So here in this table that you're filling out on the page, the numbering is just, it's random. It's, you should be consistent from survey to survey. If there's 2 wells and they each have treatment on it, then you'll see 2 water treatment plants here on this page under this what it's called state ID. It'll say WTPA. They'll also be aligned for WTPB. And here you just number them 1 and 2. It doesn't particularly matter as long as you designate one, the WTPA, and the other, the WTPB. And here you're just recording what type of disinfection they're going to use. And like I said, most of what you'll see is the sodium hypochlorite, the bleach. You will occasionally see UV, and it's very rare that you would see UV for disinfection. Those tend to be the larger surface water systems that have a lot of money to spend on UV. What you'll often see in the smaller water systems is, oops, I went backwards again, is a UV put in just for kicks, and we call that other. So the UV isn't really providing disinfection, it's just providing the water system apparently with peace of mind. There's no actual disinfection taking place. But you do record that there, and you answer the questions here below the table. And you can see there's some black dotted items, and I'll go through those actually on the next page. So if they're using chlorine bleach, you're answering these questions here. If they're somehow using chlorine gas, which you probably won't run into that much, you'll be answering questions here. If they're not using it, just click the NA box. Yeah, and I literally tried to click the NA box. And if they're using UV, you answer these questions here. Whether or not they're using it for disinfection or residual maintenance, UV questions get answered. Same thing up here for bleach, sodium hypochlorite. You have to answer those questions whether or not they're using it for disinfection or for residual maintenance. There are a couple of questions here that are only for surface water systems or groundwater systems that are using that groundwater rule 4 log, the one that's actually marked disinfection. You probably won't be answering a lot of those questions. You'll probably be clicking NA. There's also a question there for continuous monitoring if the population is over 3,300. You guys will be answering NA because all of your populations are less than 3,300. And then if they're doing actual disinfection, you'll also be answering some of the questions at the bottom of the page here under CT evaluation for disinfection. And if you guys get to that point, I suggest calling up your technical staff person at the state the first time you have to go through it. So it's not horribly complicated, but I don't want to spend any time going through it on this for a first shot through it. Okay, so for common disinfection deficiencies, you'd you might see them not using a DPD style test kit. Typically, you're going to see like a handheld hot kit for that. And those are probably okay as long as it can measure within the range that we would expect to see. Probably not a swimming pool test kit. And then NSF 60 or 61, so the chemical has to be marked. And you can see down here in the lower right-hand corner on the screen, there's a picture of the NSF symbol. You're looking for that on the chlorine stuff, so like the chemical, whether it's chlorine bleach or a vat of chemicals that they get in a bigger container, or if they're doing on-site generation and they're using salt. All that has to be NSF 60. So you're looking for that and answering that question. And then the equipment has to be NSF 61. And it should say on it, and if it doesn't say on it, you ask them for the proof. Basically, you call it out and ask them to submit proof that it's NSF. And then the other question that you'll have to answer is whether the distribution residuals are recorded at least twice weekly. And that is the minimum number that they have to do it. What?
The minimum amount of flare.
Or as Tia likes to say, the minimum amount of flare, if you're an office space person. Okay, so the next page after disinfection is treatment. And for really small systems, if you're doing disinfection, yes, you're also doing the treatment page, even though you'll feel like you're repeating some of the stuff over again. So my cheat sheet on how to fill this out is actually to pull up the next page in the survey. If you have a blank survey form, you would see this right after the treatment page. It is the list of treatment codes. And we usually take that treatment code page out before we send the survey up to the state or out to the water system. But that's how I fill out this form. So like in this case, we know that the process they're using is residual maintenance hypochlorination. And that's, sorry, I'm having such a hard time with the,
I think you have to use one of the
there we go. Okay. So in this case, this is the process, the residual maintenance hypochlorination. And that's what you'd be filling out in this first one. The chemical added is the sodium hypochlorite. The purpose is up here. It's the residual maintenance. And if I get rid of this table and make this go away so I can see the rest of my screen, you can see that the code was on that page as well, on the treatment code page, and it's X421. And you're just answering a bunch of questions like, is the treatment the same? Again, you're answering whether it's NSF standard 60. You're not really answering that bypass piping question. I'm just looking at the significant deficiency black dots at this point. That's probably not something you're going to come across. It's mostly surface water treatment rule and groundwater rule. You're going to click, see what sort of records they keep, like dosages and stuff like that. And one quick note, you don't fill out particulate removal for groundwater systems. So sometimes when you're in the field, you're going to come across what we would call a roughing filter or a frog filter. That's not particulate removal, so don't use a P code for that. On storage and pressure tanks, again, the numbering system up here on the top of the table on the left-hand side is a bit random. Just make sure you're consistent year to year in assigning it. In this case, I call the first one the Clifford Reservoir. It's a ground tank. It's not elevated. It's not a pressure tank. It's made out of concrete. I note the year that it was built and the volume that it was. And you can put in 100,000 or you can put in 100K, whatever works for you. And then you just, you keep listing those. I've got another one there that's a ground one that's a steel tank with a different volume. And then the third one is a pressure tank that was located at well 5. I made all this up, of course. Pressure tank, and it's 5,000 gallons. So the one thing you want to do, and I didn't do it here just to illustrate, you have to put the total volume. So you're supposed to add all those together and come up with a number. The regular tanks are listed here, like a concrete or a steel tank would be here, reservoir 1, reservoir 2. Your pressure tanks have a separate section with separate questions down here, number 3. For customizing the form, if I don't have any pressure tanks, I often get rid of that bottom portion of the table, and I use it for like pictures of the tanks. If I'm identifying some sort of significant deficiency, I'll copy in and paste a picture. So that's, it's just something I do. You don't have to do it. Storage and pressure tanks, the significant deficiencies would be things like access hatch not secured, your roof and hatch not watertight, your overflow not protected, or no screened vent. And Casey's going to talk pretty soon about how we look at those, because here at the state, at least, we're not allowed to climb on top of tanks. So we can't go up and look and see if there's a lock on the hatch or whether the vent screen is in place. So he'll talk about that real briefly. But some of the common things we've seen are like holes in the top of the tanks. The overflow here, this is a pipe that comes out so that the reservoir doesn't get too full and it'll like dump out this pipe and end up somewhere on the ground. We've seen these like stuck open before. If it's in a ditch and it's flowed a lot, sometimes rocks in the ditch will get stuck in there. So you want to actually look at the overflow, and you might warn the water system in advance that you need to see it, because sometimes they don't know where that pipe comes out and they have to go do some bushwhacking. And I'd rather they do the bushwhacking first and clear the area before I get out there. Here in this case, we've got some pictures of common vents. Here we don't have any screen. It's not protected by some sort of a top piece. Here's a mushroom style screen vent that you'll see. The vent is actually underneath the mushroom cap. And here the vent is not completely screened. There's some break in the screen there. So moving on real quickly, because I know I'm taking too much time. The distribution system information. So, this is one of those tough ones where it's really just a conversation with the water system operator, because it's all underground. You can't see any of the pipes generally, or at least you shouldn't be able to see the pipes. So you'll be asking them whether they have some sort of map system where you can see their surface area and facility map that shows the water lines, where the sampling points are and that sort of thing. And then the distribution data here in the middle of the form, it's the conversation. It's where you start to ask them leading questions. You don't want to say, is your system pressure greater than 20 psi everywhere? You want to say, so tell me what sort of system pressures you usually see in your system. And then, like for water system leakage, you wouldn't say, hey, is it always less than 10%? You'd say, what typically is the system leakage, if you know it? Can you tell me about what percentage it is? So this is, again, just a conversation that you have with the water system as you're out there. And then the cross-connection stuff here at the bottom of the form, there's 4 questions. All 4 apply to community water systems, and only the first one applies to the non-transient, non-community systems, or the transient, non-community systems. And some of this stuff is available online, some of it is not. So the assembly is tested annually. They're supposed to send in a report every single year to us. And my next slide, there's an online survey that the water systems can fill out, but you can't actually see it. So you'd have to contact Molly Keller. And here at the bottom of this screen for cross-connection stuff is the email address that Molly Keller really wants you to use. You can see here on the screenshot that we grabbed of data online, we've talked about wells, or sources here, wells. We've talked about treatment. And here is your cross-connection stuff here, whether they have an enabling authority, whether they've turned in their reports, whether they paid their invoice. So these are things when you're filling out, this form, going on to data online will answer a lot of the questions here. And I think we are up to Casey Lyon. So I'm just going to quickly check for any questions you might have. I know I went a little fast at the end there.
Just click on that. You're on the wrong way.
Tia tells me I'm going the wrong way here.
Oh, you have a question about UV.
Says UV is not a good option for disinfection. So UV, sorry to get to that question so late. UV isn't a horrible option for disinfection, but in order to get disinfection out of it, you're probably paying a pretty fair amount of money to get a decent sized UV reactor. The stuff that a lot of the smaller water systems put in is the off-the-shelf stuff. If you go on our website under the plan review section, we have a listing of the UV reactors that have been certified for various things, and we break them into two categories. The top section of that, and I'm sorry I don't have that here, the top section of that shows those that actually have some sort of log removal disinfection, things that we would consider disinfection. And then we have the others that are like, you can slap it on a small water system with no piping, but it's not going to carry any sort of protection through the system. So the answer is yes and no, and it really just depends on how much money they spent on a system, and chances are the small water systems haven't spent the money to get ones that are really good for disinfection. And I think that's it. I'm going to turn it over to Casey.
Okay, thanks, Gary. Water quality monitoring page is a very important page that
Can you say something?
I am here. Can you hear me?
See you.
You may have to unmute me.
I know. Well, we're gonna turn up our volume too. I just wanted to be able to hear too.
Can you guys hear me okay?
I don't know if anyone can hear me. I'm mumbling here. Casey, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh,
you
I
hear
can
me?
hear you. Yeah. So what I was trying to do is I was trying to unplug the headset so that Carrie and I can hear you talk.
Okay.
Could you hear me when I unplugged it?
Not really, no.
Not really. You could a little?
Mumbling and bumbling in the background, yeah.
Oh, so that's the wrong one. Let's try.
Are we good to go? Can anybody else hear me?
Okay. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
All right. You can hear me. Why don't you go ahead and go? And it looks like we have a question. We can't hear you, Tia. Okay, but now you can. Okay, go
Yep.
ahead and
We're good.
go ahead and go, Casey, and I will thumb
Okay.
through the slides for you.
All right, this almost last page is water quality monitoring. This is an important page that that everybody, the county, ag, and the state will need to fill out to make sure their monitoring schedule is current, and to kind of point out to the water system what monitoring is due next. So we have all the different contaminants here on the left, and it's also separated out at the location of where to sample. So you'll see arsenic, IOCs, nitrate, RADs, SOCs, and VOCs are always taken at the entry point to the distribution system. That is the finished water, representative of completely finished water. Sometimes it's at the first user or at the what we call entry point. The other section, distribution monitoring, is coliform bacteria, asbestos, only if they have asbestos pipe in the system, in the actual piping, the distribution piping themselves, or in some very rare areas geologically in the state, there's naturally occurring asbestos in the geology. TTHMs, HA5s, those are the disinfection byproducts. Those are going to be taken out in the distribution system, likely in the kind of far out parts of the system or the longest residence time. the oldest type of water is where you would sample for the DBPs. And then the other last one distribution system is lead and copper. Other sampling is kind of the miscellaneous TOC, turbidity, source water coliform. And that source water coliform is the only one you'd actually be collecting a regulatory site at the raw water well, at the groundwater, raw water before any treatment. That's your source water. Also could be called your triggered source or assessment sample location. The next column over is the NA, where you can select NA that these contaminants are not required to be sampled by this type of water system. So most likely all your systems wouldn't be required to do turbidity, and TNCs don't have to do a lot of the like VOCs, SOCs, RADs, IOCs and stuff. So put NA checkboxes for those that don't apply. The number and frequency is basically just, it's like, let's take arsenics for example. You'd say how many arsenic samples are required and the frequency. So if it's once every 3 years or once every 9 years, you would write that in, once every 9 years. The next column over is next tests due. So what I've been trained is you want to write the next test due. So if it's, say, 2019, they need to take an arsenic sample, you write 2019. And if they're on a every 9 year schedule, then you'd write in 2019, 2028, 2037. So you want to kind of give them the next 3 rounds of when it's due. The other kind of lower down in the form where these black dots are the significant deficiencies. So you'd want to make sure that all the required monitoring is current. You can check that on Data Online to make sure they haven't got any monitoring or reporting violations. Make sure they haven't missed any required samples. If they have, then you'd want to certainly check no here, that is a significant deficiency. All samples collected at the current locations in the system. This is where you can kind of discuss where samples should be collected from. We do see, a fair amount of samples collected at the wrong location. So it's really important that you kind of have a conversation with the system about where these different samples need to be collected from. And then, of course, collecting, especially the coliform sample, is pretty critical. You want to make sure you have sample instructions to make sure you don't contaminate that coliform bacteria test. Have all MCL violations or lead and copper rule action level exceedances been addressed? So this is if they say exceeded for arsenic or nitrate, or if they have a MCL, maximum contaminant level violation, they generally, we'll need to fix that with some type of treatment or a new source. And this is our chance to, if they haven't addressed it, it's definitely a deficiency, we'd mark no, and also write in comments here what they're doing to address the MCL violation, or if they're just installing treatment, or if they're planning to drill a new well, or whatever it is, we want to make sure we document that. DBPs collected at correct locations, you want to have a conversation about where those are sampled from. And on our Data Online, we should have that identified where the sample location should be under disinfection byproducts, DBPs. Does the system have a written coliform sampling plan? This is one of the 3 kind of required plans by a water system. So, and there's about 6 or so different check boxes. You want to make sure that the coliform sampling plan, that they have a sample collection protocol, in the map, have a map showing where the sample sites are, have a rotation through those different sample sites, and then also make sure that those repeat locations and any triggered source samples are identified, so that if the main operator isn't there for some reason, someone can go to this written plan and collect the required samples properly. So that is a pretty important page. Unfortunately, we don't have the technology yet to automatically change sample frequency or the schedule change. So if there's a reduction, let's say arsenic, say it's a new well and they sample as part of initial monitoring, they do their initial monitoring and everything looks good and they're ready for sampling reduction. This is where we would really like to have the software automatically change the sample schedule to reflect the reduction as samples come in, but we don't have that yet. Maybe in the future we'll get that. So it's really on the regulator to go through and make sure that the sampling, the monitoring frequency is correct, and be familiar with rules. If there is a reduction possible, you can certainly give that reduction, and this is where you would document that and talk about it in the comments as well. So next page, please. Water quality monitoring. This is, I think I may have already kind of touched on this, but you just want to review the sampling plan procedures for chemical and coliform, know where to sample. Lead and copper has definitely been kind of in the hot spotlight recently, so you want to make sure that where they're collecting, this is for community water systems, are the only ones that have to do lead and copper, that they really are sampling from the correct locations. And the lead and copper rule can be very complicated and quite extensive, so please reach out to your state technical services contact if you have any questions about lead and copper in general, and the sampling, the very, very strict sampling requirements for lead and copper. It's a first draw sample. It has to be from tier 1 homes. Ideally, if the community system has homes built between January 1st, 1983, or in between no later than June 30th, 1985. This is the tier 1 time when homes were built that thought to be the highest risk for lead and copper exposure. DBP sampling sites, I think I spoke a little bit about that already, but those are just for disinfection byproducts that could be formulated from chlorine. So if they use chlorine in its community system, or an NT, NC, which is non-transient, non-community, then they'll need to do disinfection byproducts monitoring at the correct locations. And then coliform sampling, you just want to make sure that that's in locations representative of the water system. So if there's different pressure zones or different areas of the distribution system, different sources come in from different entry points, you want to make sure that you have representative sites throughout the system. And then you'll want to review the monitoring schedules with the operator. We do have a pretty handy water quality summary details page on Data Online that you can review what their current schedule is, and so that kind of makes it somewhat easy to fill out the form. The one thing you got to keep in mind is if there's any possible reductions or monitoring increases that has changed since then, so you want to update the survey to reflect any changes in the monitoring frequency or schedule. Next slide. Last page of the survey form is the management and operations page. This is, again, kind of more a sit down and have a discussion, a conversation with the operator about the management and operations of the water system. So the other 2 plans that are required, we already talked about coliform sampling plan, but we also have the operation and maintenance manual, which is a very important plan that just basically discusses everything that has to occur in order to keep this water system operating and being maintained regularly. So things like on a weekly basis, what the water system operator would do, monthly basis, quarterly basis, annual basis, you know, how they maintain the system. The idea is to have all this stuff written down so that if the operator that's been there for 20 years decides to leave, all that knowledge isn't lost somewhere, so that it's written down somewhere, that it's not lost, so that the next person has a good plan on what to do to operate the system. The last plan is emergency response plan. This is a requirement following 2001, 9/11, and all water systems are required to have the emergency response plan. Sometimes we call it the ERP plan. There is some helpful information online. I think most systems by now have it, but it's the kind of thing that can just collect dust on the plan. If you don't use it, if you don't look at it, you need to periodically, usually a lot of recommendations in the survey letter is to recommend updating your emergency response plan or operation maintenance plan to make sure they have correct phone numbers, contact information, just to make sure you're going through that, so that's a useful plan if in the case you have an emergency and you need to use it. Operator certification, this is our section to talk with the operator about, make sure that the operators are current, that there is a DRC, which is the direct responsible in charge, is identified and certified at the appropriate level for that particular water system. And then there is written protocols if they have under certified operators. Let's say that there's a, let's say the pretty extensive treatment system and it requires a water treatment 1. This may be fairly rare for groundwater systems. We see it more at the state with surface water systems. But if there is a treatment requirement above just the small water system training course, then they have to have written protocols for those operators that are under certified, so that everybody understands what they can and can't do without talking to the DRC first. So that is also a written protocol, and in some systems that is required. Plan review master plan. Have all major modifications been approved by Drinking Water Services? This is, if you come across a water system that, according to data online, doesn't have any treatment, and all of a sudden you see a chlorinator in the well house, or some type of major modification to the system, that may indicate that they haven't gone through plan review yet. So you can always check with the data online. There is a little blue tab at the bottom of the page that says plan review. So you can click on that to see if they've gone through plan review. If they haven't gone through plan review and it is a major modification, then that should be marked as a no, and that's a significant deficiency. They're going to have to go through plan review after the fact, which is always risky, because if they installed something that we can't approve, they're going to have to redo it, make sure that it's approved before you actually install something. Does the system have a current master plan? This is not required if it's a smaller system, less than 300 connections, but it is required if they're above 300 connections. You just want to make sure it's current within the last 20 years. And generally that is also something that is plan review required. And then, of course, the last thing is this, the compliance status. So you want to look at under data online, there's violations page, and there's also compliance and enforcement page to see if there's any administrative orders or any formal enforcement that's out there that make sure they're still on track to meet those deadlines that's in the administrative order. This is our chance to give them a significant deficiency if they're falling behind on doing some type of corrective action. So if they got cited for a deficiency and it's a high priority deficiency and they haven't corrected it, there may be some informal enforcement or formal enforcement out there with deadlines. And if they haven't met those deadlines, they get a significant deficiency again. They're going to need to correct that. Does the system issue public notices required? This is, again, a little blue tab on data online. You can check that to see if any violations they received in the past, if they've done the proper public notice in the timeline as needed. And consumer confidence reports sent to each user. This is easily determined by looking at the data online page. Their main home page down at the bottom will show when the last time that we received a consumer confidence report. And then any comments, if there's any issues with operator certification or plan review or anything, you just want to make sure the comments reflect that. So the big goal here with the overall survey report is this is our one chance to document anything that was found or any issues that they're having. So document, document, document is kind of the name of the game here on the report. Next slide, please.
Oh, I think you talked about all this.
Yeah, this will kind of show, if you click on the plan review page, this little plan review records will show up, and so you can see when we received the data, and then if we did a conditional approval letter, when that was sent out, and kind of the big thing here in the red is if we've granted final approval yet. And the reviewer will just say who's done that plan review, so you can always contact the state to see if there's any plan review questions.
And we'll look at all of these for our systems the morning before we do the surveys, for those of you that are really confused right now or have no idea what tabs we're talking about.
Yeah, thank you. We'll be doing a lot of kind of preparing for surveys before we actually go out in the field. So next Wednesday we'll kind of sit down and look at each system. This is data online. This is our kind of first page that you get to where you want to find a certain water system. You can type in either their name by the WS name lookup or the WS ID lookup. And this one shows the ID lookup. And then Oregon, all the water systems start with 41, so we generally don't need to write 41. We just write the last 5 digits. And then once you write in the water system ID number, click enter, it'll pop up their main page. And let's see if the next slide.
Yeah, we don't go there.
Okay, well, this in red here, there's a good box, and see all these blue tabs. These are all hyperlinks to the different information that I kind of referenced. There's one for plan review on the top right. DBPs on the bottom left, lead and copper. So you can basically look at all the different results, and the schedule, chemical schedule details page is one of our kind of most important pages. It just kind of talks about this chemical schedules and when the next one is due and if it's done already or not. So there's a lot of good information. We try to put everything out here that is important for that water system on these little blue hyperlink tabs at the bottom of their page.
So Casey, in the sake of time and keeping to schedule, because I know there's other people on the webinar that have possibly other obligations or their stomach is just getting really grumbly, I think maybe now could be a good point to skip to where I talk about what groups we're going to be in, and then we kind of just wrap up the webinar, and we can do this preparing for the survey right before we actually prepare for the survey. Does that work for you?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, no problem.
So we're going to skip through a couple sides here that Casey was going to talk about. Whoa, I didn't know there was animation on those. Woo. Okay. So next week, this is what our agenda, oh, there's a 2 missing. Darn that 2. Where did that go? This is what our agenda looks like for next week. We are meeting at address number 2577 Northeast Courtney Drive in the Crater Lake Conference Room in Bend. And we're going to break off into, well, so this is going to be changed a little bit. We're going to go over Casey's survey prep, and we're going to just do a brief little presentation on survey prep that we didn't cover today. And then we're going to break off into our small groups and work on Jeff Freund from Deschutes County is going to bring his water system files over for the water systems that we're working on that you can see right here. These are the 3 systems that we're visiting. And we're going to dig through the water system files. We're going to look at data online, and we're going to start to fill out the water system survey forms. Lunch should be delivered around, I can't remember if it's 11 or 11:30. We're going to eat lunch whenever you're hungry, whenever you're ready to eat lunch, and then you're meeting your water systems around 12:30, and then you just have to be back around 3 o'clock just to work on writing up the survey. So that's letting you know the agenda for the rest of the training, and then like I said, the following day we're going to do some more survey write-up. So here are the 3 water systems, and these are the water system groups. I apologize if anyone's name is spelt wrong. We will fix it if it's spelled wrong. Let me know. These 2 water systems, Eagle Crest and Oregon Water Utilities Klein Butte, are in the same location. One serves as an emergency source to the other water system. And so these 2 groups will be going to the same area. Each of these 3 water systems are about 25 to 30 minutes away from where we are going to be in Bend. And as you can see, there's 1 state staff per group. And then there's a few county folks. We try to organize things coherently. Like I work with Helen, and so I wanted her in my group because I have Lincoln County, and I hope everyone gets along well together. So this is your public water system ID number. Go ahead and write that down for your respective group. Lets you know your type of water system, community water system, population about 400, and the same thing for the other 2 water systems. And this is just to give you an idea about what type of water system you're going to visit. And in between now and then, you feel free to explore data online, take a look at your water system survey forms, figure out how they work, see if you have any questions about them, and just keep an eye on the weather, because that'll determine how many layers you wear, which rain jacket you bring, and which shoes you bring. So those are just some things you can do between now and then when we carry on the rest of the training. I'll end on this slide just so that you can take a look at which water systems you're visiting and write down the PWS ID number. You can just kind of click around on data online and don't get too involved into it, but if you see anything that would be a deficiency on the form, go ahead and start to make notes and write it down and bring it with you next week when we get together. Carrie's got the weather. It's looking like just a bunch of sunshines, happy smiley faces, no rain clouds. I'm going to check for questions one last time to see if anyone has any outstanding questions, and then I'm going to let you guys all go, and then we will meet together Wednesday morning at 9 o'clock at 2577 Northeast Courtney Drive, Deschutes County office. We will have lunch, but we won't have any snack or anything for you that morning. So have some water, have a water bottle, and be dressed and ready to go out into the field right around lunchtime. Questions, where's my questions tab? Okay, let's see. No other questions. So that was it. That was all we have for you guys today. The rest will be in person. We just wanted to take some good chunk of time just to go over and thoroughly explain what a survey is, what the different pages of the form is, and just get some familiarization so that when we get together on Wednesday morning, we'll all be on the same page as far as training and familiarization with what a survey is and how to manipulate and use the survey forms. If you have a laptop computer that you use for work and you're able to bring it with you, I would recommend bringing it. We do have Wi-Fi ability at the Deschutes County office building, and it would be great if you could start to fill out a survey form on your laptop, and then we can find a way to have it printed there. So that's the only other tidbit of information I had. Water bottle, proper attire, laptop, anything that you would bring with you when you go out and do a water system survey. I've already let the systems know that we're coming. I sent them the we're coming form and things to prepare. Hopefully they'll have some pictures of their reservoirs for us. They are preparing to have small groups visit them. Does anyone have any questions of us? Raise your hand if you have a question. Kevin, okay. You do not have a microphone, so if you could type in your question, that would be great, or you can email it to me and I can get back to you. Do you have anything else you wanted to remind them of, Casey?
No, not necessarily. Just bring the right attire. I think we're going to have decent weather, but never hurts to throw in rain jacket, some boots. If you have a flashlight or camera, bring extra batteries, cell phone charged. There's no treatment, so you probably don't have to bring chlorine test kit or pH meter.
Yeah, I
No,
guess that's an area that we didn't talk about, but this is what you would do to prepare for your survey is you would bring some of this equipment. And that was actually Kevin's question is, will we be sending a list of, what was the question? Recommended items. Yeah, we're not going to need a chlorine test kit. I mean, ultimately, you're going to need yourself. You're going to need, if you have a laptop for work, I would bring that, charger for your laptop, water, pretty
maybe a little
basic.
notepad.
Yeah,
write some
notebook, notepad. If you have a flashlight, that would be great. Most offices have cameras to take pictures of the water system deficiencies. It's not really an extensive list. I don't think it's enough that warrants me typing it up and sending it out to everyone. So I guess the long answer to your question is no. I think you can use your professional judgment. And if you don't have something, someone else in your group probably will have. If not, then we can usually make do without. But you're going to be spending the night, so you're going to need to bring all of those items as well. All right. I think that's all the questions we had. So I just want to thank everyone for attending, and I hope that this format worked out well. I know there's a few people on the webinar that are not going to be visiting or joining us next week. So you guys will get the CEUs, you guys will get the credits for today, and those that are doing both sessions will get the combination of the CEUs. I will send out an email about the agenda one last time before we head out before we head out next week. I'll send out the agenda with the location, just as a final reminder, people can print off with them and bring. But most people are staying at the Fairfield Inn on Wall Street in Bend. Not saying you have to stay there. That's just an approved, recommended location. But anyways, thank you everyone. I believe this webinar is being recorded. If not, then it wasn't. If you have any specific questions, just feel free to email myself and I'll make sure that I can get the answer that you need. Alrighty, well, thank you everyone. We will see you guys next week. Thank you, Casey. Thank you, Carrie.
Yep, see you next week.